All right, here we are at the next bridge that is east of Massachusetts Street. This is the Virginia Street Bridge. It's an older bridge. It escapes me right now when this bridge was built, but it's older. I believe it was built in the 1930s or late 1920s. You can see that the bridge is completely different from the first bridge that we talked about in the first video. All right. So as I stated, Indiana Harbor Belt had exclusive rights on this bridge, and it served the businesses on Massachusetts Street from a lead that I talked about. That lead came right through here. It came off of the bridge up there. It came right through here, across the street, and entered into the industrial park that's back there through those trees and stuff. You can still kind of see the crack in the street. It's amazing how the earth kind of holds on to the memory of the rails here. You can see where the lead came off across the street, and there was a railroad gate here, and that was it. It was nothing else to it really. This was just a place where Indiana Harbor Belt crossed Virginia Street to be able to enter the industrial yard. And this is Indiana Sugars over here, owned by the Yarnover family. They've been here for a very, very long time. One of the only businesses in the city that is still serviced by the railroad, but it's not serviced by Indiana Harbor Belt. It is serviced by Norfolk Southern. So we're gonna come back here and just take a look at the old lead, the area of the old lead anyway. There's nothing here. There's no rails here anymore, no railroad industrial apparatus except for that little stump there. Nothing to show that there ever was any railroad tracks here at all whatsoever. All right. But anyway, back to this bridge. The bridge itself is completely different construction from the Massachusetts Street Bridge that we showcased from the first video. You can tell that the construction was quick and shoddy and was done hastily. It is not as sturdy as the other bridge. It is very scant. The details of the bridge are minimum. You have a reinforced concrete pillar here. All right. And some more reinforced concrete up here. That's how you know it's of a slightly modern construction. Like I said, late 20s, 30s. All right. And the bridge sits, you have these trusses here. The trusses have feet that sit on top of the concrete pillars, and that's what holds up the weight of the bridge. You also have another one over there and another poured concrete embankment, reinforced concrete. You can tell that there is some damage here. It was done by weathering, not done by operations from the railroads. Okay? So this is one of 22 bridges that was on the branch. Okay? You can see just how cheaply this bridge was made. It was done in haste, done quickly, with minimum money, minimum resources used. And as I stated, when Gary and Western was first constructed, all of this was earth and embankment. These bridges were not here. All right? People could not pass through Virginia Street and go from the north side of Gary onto the south side. They had to go through Broadway or they had to go through Massachusetts Street. So residents, citizens had to really band together to get the railroad to agree to open up spaces in the embankment to be able to allow for better development of the south side of the city. All right, so it was because some of those residents and businesses band together so early in its history that these bridges and these streets exist through the embankment of the Gary and Western. And there were a number of bridges that were only constructed because of grassroots efforts, such as citizens and businesses banding together, And on a few occasions, the city of Gary actually built some bridges and charged the railroads later. The Chase Street Bridge, the Gary and Western Bridge on Chase Street, is an example of that. That was also built around the same time that this bridge was built. And if you go to the Chase Street Bridge, you see that this bridge on Virginia Street and on Chase Street looks identical. The one on Chase Street is slightly longer, maybe longer by about 5 or 6 feet on either end of the embankment. But those bridges are almost identical to one of these two bridges are identical. All right. But you can see that they're cheaply built, cheaply made, was not built with any kind of care. I mean, the quality is all right because they're standing up. It's just the bridges itself are standing on reinforced concrete. They got that right, but as far as how sturdy the bridge is, it looks nothing like the Massachusetts Street Bridge. I decided to record this during rush hour when people are getting off of work. That was very smart of me. Let me walk to the other side of the bridge while I'm talking. All right. So you can see that this bridge is narrower than the Massachusetts Street Bridge. But the concept is the same. The major difference between this bridge on Virginia Street and the one on Massachusetts Street is the way that the concrete pillars were constructed. The Massachusetts Street Bridge is very robust, thicker pillars. They use more concrete, more reinforced concrete, wider transoms on the bridge spans, the trusses. But the basic concept of how these bridges were constructed were the same. They sit on feet on top of the concrete pillars, and that's what holds up the weight of the entire bridge. I've been up top. Have I been up top to this bridge before? I think I have. I think I took some pictures on top of this bridge. There are rails up here on the bridge, but there's really nothing really to see, especially with all the vegetation. But if you guys are watching this particular video, I recorded another video talking about the bridge on Massachusetts Street. That's the first video. This is the second one. All right. So this is the bridge on Virginia Street in between 8th and Virginia and 11th and Virginia on the Gary and Western. As I stated, it was opened up to allow for access for developers, businesses, and just residents to be able to get from one side of the city, the north side of the city, to the other without always going through Broadway or Madison Street. And it's crazy how they just built this up and just threw some dirt up and gave no damn about how the city was gonna, operate from the north side to the south side. All of this was just earthen embankment. You could not pass it. So it's because, like I said, of grassroots efforts from different people, different businesses, why these openings exist today. But today, I advocate for some of these to be closed again. Gary is not the city that it used to be. It's a vast swath of town that is abandoned, not used for anything. And I think it will be a help to the railroads to be able to eliminate some crossings, and a help to the city to be able to block access to certain areas of town that they cannot afford to revamp. And if there are no plans on, reactivating this line, then I would advocate for some of these places to be closed off again. But not here, not at this location. All right. So there's really nothing else to speak about off the top of my head as far as this bridge is concerned. I just wanted to show you the huge differences between how the bridges were constructed in the 1950s versus how the bridges were constructed in the late 1920s, 1930s, and the type of money and care that went into the construction of these bridges. And there are still other types of bridges. Like I said, there were 22 bridges in total on the line, and the bridges were built in different eras. They used different techniques, slightly different techniques for each bridge, which makes some of the bridges very unique. And there were 22 of them. You can kind of see in the era of, Conrail and how they were trying to save money, why they had no interest in keeping this line alive, because they had to invest money in maintaining all of these bridges on this elevated line. Just at minimum $1 million each for 22 bridges. That's $22 million for a line that they barely use. Just from a business point of view, it didn't make any sense. But from a rail fan point of view and practicality, and for the future of the city of Gary, from that point of view, of course, we all wish that Conrail had paid attention to this line more, had deemed this line necessary and important enough to be able to find a way to maintain it without completely and totally abandoning it. And I will argue today that the Gary and Western line is needed more now than it ever was before. And right on the other side of the bridge, right back here behind there, Michigan Central had their rail yard in Gary. So in between Virginia Street and Massachusetts Street, Michigan Central had a humongous classification yard that they used for different reasons. And like I said, they had a passenger depot back there. But all of that was ripped up by the end of the 80s. And now you have all this bullshit back here that nobody cares about. The Wabash Railroad is behind us once again. And this was the beginning of their stub yard. The entrance for the yard was up there. They were able to come off the main line and enter the yard. And like I said, also in between Virginia Street and Broadway was that Wabash Railroad stub yard. And then you had Indiana Harbor Belt servicing a big industrial park. They used to sit back here behind these weeds. And they came off of the main line from back here and crossed Virginia Street. Indiana Harbor Belt came off of the main line here and crossed Virginia Street in order to access that industrial park that sat back there. So this used to be a very dynamic, very industrialized place. If you were a rail fan back in the day, this probably would have been a great spot to come. In between 8th Avenue and 11th Avenue, you had Michigan Central, then you had Indiana Harbor Belt, and then you had this industrial line, then you had the stub yard, then you had Wabash and whatever they were doing back there. This used to be a very, very dynamic place, and now it's not even a shadow of its former self. It's just done. It's dead. The Wabash doesn't exist anymore. Gary and Western is abandoned. The industrial park is gone. All you have is a remnant on the Michigan Central and a single track. There is no rail yard anymore. Trains just pass through, rarely stopping. Like I said, you do have Indiana Sugars back here. They have railroad operations through Norfolk and Southern. We're not talking about Indiana Sugars and how they do their railroad operations right now at this moment. Right now we're talking about the Gary and Western, Indiana Harbor Belt. All right, so let's go try to find another bridge and look at some more construction techniques so I can be able to show you again just how different all of the bridges were on the Gary and Western elevated line in the city